Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this episode of my bio series. On this episode, we're going to chat about Stephen Meisel, who is, I think, the most influential living photographer in fashion today. I was doing research on him. He's really hard to find information on because he does almost no interviews. I found one incredible interview with him by the magazine 032C, and I'll put that below in a link. And I was able to find a little bit on him. So let's talk about a little bit about his history. He was born in 1954 in New York City. And, Stephen has been shooting the cover of Italian Vogue for over 20 years. He started working for Franca Susani back in the 80s for her magazine Louis that she did before she did, Lee, L-E-I, and then there was a men's version, Pro Louis, I think that's how you say it, P-E-R-L-U-I, sorry, my Texan accent, but, so he's had this long time, amazing, relationship with Franca Susani over at Italian Vogue, and has basically been given carte blanche on what he wants to do for the cover and inside stories for the issue. And I think that's probably where he puts out his most influential work, because he's mostly able to do what he wants as far as creativity is concerned. Now, his other kind of big, huge claim to fame, he shot the cover of Madonna's Like a Virgin record, which is was my favorite image of all time. Even when I was a child, I used to dress like that. I went to my freaking cotillion classes for manor school, dressed like Madonna on the cover of Like a Virgin. So, he has a long-standing collaboration with Madonna, and he also shot the Madonna sex book in 1992 that was art directed by Fabian Baron. And, that was kind of a huge moment in time, and also, interestingly enough, the first time that anyone as big as pop culture as Madonna was kind of objectively sexifying men. So I like the kind of sexual equality that happens there, and that Stephen Meisel helped create with Madonna. So, going back to his history, he was obsessed. The story goes that he was obsessed with fashion magazines and drawing and sketching women and fashion versus any kind of toy or anything that normal kids were obsessed with. And he says in the interview that I found with him that when he was in 7th and 8th grade, he had a little Instamatic camera, and he used to stalk the streets of New York looking for models like Twiggy and Verushka and Jean Shrimpton, and apparently some of these models had a house across the street from his, or apartment across the street, so he used to stand on the street and paparazzi shoot them. And so he was obsessed with these girls from a young age. He used to stand outside of the model agencies and wait for them to come in and out so he could take pictures of them on the street, just like the paparazzis do to celebrities today. Now, he started his career. He first started doing illustration. So he was doing illustration for Halston in the 70s, and then he ended up teaching illustration at Parsons part-time. And he also then became an illustrator for Women's Wear Daily, because in the 70s it wasn't fashion photography in Women's Wear Daily, it was mostly illustration. So he was still doing illustration. He started taking pictures on the weekend. Now, one of the agents at Elite, one of the directors at the Elite model agency in New York, liked Stephen and gave him girls to test on the weekend. So he would work his normal job, like a 9-to-5 job as an illustrator at Women's Wear Daily, and on the weekends he would start testing these models. One of those girls ended up being Phoebe Cates, who I love and obsessed with, of course. Phoebe Cates was amazing. And then 17 magazine ended up seeing some of his testing pictures and asking him if he wanted to shoot for them. Now, soon after that, Vogue and Italian Vogue and Franca Susani and all that stuff started to fall into place, and he started shooting for Italian Vogue with Franca Susani in 1988 and then hasn't stopped. Now, Stephen was also known as this incredible, beautiful club kid on the scene in the 80s, and he was known for this long, gorgeous dark hair and this amazing bronze skin and insane gorgeous eyeliner, and wearing these big, huge sunglasses and a scarf for a hat, and just looked like a glamorous supermodel. And the other thing that I think was so interesting about Stephen is he was best friends with Cindy and Linda and Naomi, who were all the original, supermodels. Christy Linda and Naomi, and they were all good friends, and they all shared rooms when they would travel to go to the shows, and he was just nonstop taking pictures of these girls and kind of documenting all their fun life together. They were all around the same age, so they really got on, and it really became a little community for them, where for them work was just, you know, hanging out with your friends and doing hair and makeup. And back then there weren't, you know, tons, huge teams that you worked with. It was just, you know, maybe hair and makeup, Kevin Aquan and Garen, and those guys were Orbet, and then you had your supermodel. So he was really responsible for creating a lot of the imagery that made these girls considered super. And so, you know, I can consider, and today he still is the one, when a girl shoots with Steven, when a girl does an Italian Vogue cover with him, you know, that's the most influential thing that she can really have in her career, to start someone's career. I mean, he started Karen Elson's career, he started Stella Tennant's career, he started Agnes Dean's career. He might have not been the first one to discover them, but he's the one who really put them on the map for fashion and for making money. So, you know, and I also love Ashley Brokaw, who is his casting director forever, is one of the top casting directors in the business right now, casting Balenciaga, casting Louis Vuitton, with Nicolas Gasquet, you know, casting Prada. She's an incredible force, and his teams are always the most influential people in the world too, with Pat McGrath, Garen, Orbet, Guido. You know, the hair and makeup people who come from the Steven Meisel world are the most influential people on the runway in the rest of fashion too. So one of his first ad campaigns was for Valentino, and there's a quote from Anna Sui saying he called her to style it and just said, hey, let's shoot this like we shoot everything else, like fun and crazy in their whole world at that point. So he's very close with Anna Sui and a whole bunch of those kind of crazy, amazing club kids from the 80s. He knew Steven Sprouse, that whole world, and I don't know, Steven Meisel is the reason I got into fashion. His cover with Karen Elson on the cover of Italian Vogue in the late 90s was the reason I fell in love with fashion and wanted to work in fashion. I'd always loved it before, but once I saw that, I knew I wanted to be a stylist, I knew I wanted to live in New York, and I knew I wanted to meet and work with Steven Meisel. So, I mean, you know, nobody is creating the kind of imagery that Steven creates, and I think that, like Marc Jacobs, the reason Steven is so influential to me is because he's able to take things going on in the world and do his stories, his images that kind of create what he would call putting a mirror up to what's happening in culture and putting it through, he's always a fashion photographer, and putting it through a very fashion filter. So, that being said, one of the most highly publicized issues he's ever done for Italian Vogue was one based on Black beauty, and he did the entire issue with Black models, and it was his way of pointing out the racism in fashion, and especially on the runway, and especially in fashion advertising. So I love him for that. He's also done incredible imagery based on war, you know, and his version of protesting the war, and also, you know, he hates anything that has to do with women and violence, and he'll every once in a while do a thing to kind of a spread for Italian Vogue or a shoot to kind of draw attention to that, so people, you know, obviously think it's shitty and horrible and do something about it. He also did an awesome picture, that awesome spread about celebrities, I'll throw that in here, where he was kind of making fun of the paparazzi thing. He did a great one about the mental illness, like a mental asylum / rehab kind of story that was one of my favorites. He did a great one on plastic surgery with Linda Evangelista that I was obsessed with. I'll throw all those in here in links below. But I just think that he's amazing at taking what's going on. I remember he did a Facebook one that was incredible, selfies, all that kind of stuff. I think that Steven is able to look at what's happening in culture and create some sort of fashion perspective and fashion imagery around it. And it ends up influencing designers all over. He shoots the biggest campaigns in the world. He shot Prada forever and ever and ever now, like for over 10 years now. He's been shooting, you know, he shot Louis Vuitton, he shot Versace, he shot Valentino, he shoots Lanvin, he shoots Balenciaga, he shot Balenciaga, he shot Dolce, he shot everything. So, you know, I love also, he hasn't put out a book. I'm hoping he'll put out a book. I heard a rumor he's put out a book. He's going to put out a book of his work. And I don't know, I just think Steven has his finger on the pulse of what's happening in luxury fashion and in the world, and is able to put them together beautifully and cool and to just draw attention to what's happening. So I love Steven Meisel. Check him out. Check out his work on Art and Commerce. And I'll see you guys in the next bio series. Check you later.